Okay, so I'm back for another video. I touched on the conventional guns in my last video. I'm going to progress into hvlp now. Well, the conventional gun, if you watch the other video, the pressure going into the gun is about the same coming out of the cap. High pressure in, high pressure out, high overspray, good atomization. But the wasted paint is kind of what made the government or the EPA or whoever came up with it, it was the government, I think, came up with the hvlp. hvlp stands for high volume, low pressure. They use very high CFM, which is the high volume, and the low pressure is a lot lower pressure going into the gun, but actually at the air cap is 10 psi. So pressure gets reduced internally in the gun to not exceed 10 psi at the air cap. hvlp guns were, from what I understand, kind of forced upon the industry back in the probably the 90s somewhere. Once they started getting these paints, the single stages and clear coats that were more urethane based and hardened with isocyanates and all these really nasty crap in them. The old school guns that were just belching all these paints into the atmosphere just weren't cutting it anymore, so that's why hvlp kind of came around. But because it was kind of pushed into the industry, I don't think the gun manufacturers had a lot of time to really do a lot of development. So the early hvlp guns kind of suffered in their atomization. They created a lot of orange peel compared to the conventional guns. hvlp, I kind of touched on it. There's two basic things that an hvlp gun has to conform to. And this is, I'm sure it started in California and all across the country. If you're in an hvlp zone, this is what they're talking about. The 10 psi at the air cap cannot exceed 10 psi. And it needs to have a minimum of a 65% transfer efficiency, meaning that 65% of the paint that comes out of this gun must stick to the target object, which is a lot better than the old school conventional guns that were 50% or less, typically. You're going to have a lot of old timers possibly, if you know any old time paint guys that painted with the old siphon feed, suction feed guns, are going to tell you hvlp guns suck, blah blah blah. There's some legitimacy to that argument because of the poor atomization. They're going to tell you that they can get a better paint job out of one of these old conventional guns, which is probably true, but they're going to waste a ton of paint. That's why they were kind of phased out. hvlp guns, like I said, the higher transfer efficiency is better for paint saving. They're going to save you money. There's going to be a lot less overspray in your garage or wherever you're spraying. If you've set up some sort of a tarp in a car canopy or something like that. The bad is, like I said, in a lot of the cheaper guns and some of the earlier guns, the poor atomization. With the low pressure at the cap, and because I don't think they had a lot of time to really develop their technology, they had to conform with the law, but they got what they got. So the low pressure at the cap, and they kind of try to make up for it for the high volume. So you don't get that really high pressure coming out of here, breaking the paint up into the super tiny particles, but you get the high volume of air that helps kind of blow it more gently onto your car or bike, whatever you're painting. The higher end ones, I believe, a lot of the high dollar ones, I don't really have. I'm a hobby painter, so I'm not going to buy a $600 SATA or a Wada or Optima or whatever. So I get like middle of the road guns. But I can tell you that spraying with a conventional gun definitely does give me a better finish. I don't typically use this for anything other than primer now. I've stepped up and I bought a really good compliant gun, which I'll get into another video. But another bad thing too is they have high CFM requirements. This is basically an Iwata based design. This is a Sharp Finex 3000. This one I believe requires 9 CFM at 29 psi. So 9 CFM is kind of pushing it for a 110 30 gallon or under garage compressor. If you really want to do it right, I mean, you're looking at because those 110 compressors usually cap out at about 8 CFM. So anything bigger than that, you're talking a 220, 60 gallon, you know, and some of the hvlp guns require, you know, 14 CFM, and my 60 gallon can only put out at 40, I think 12 and a half. So yeah, you got 60 gallons of air volume, but you're still going to deplete it with some of the really high CFM hvlp guns. Let me think here. So, oh, here's what I want to say. When you get an hvlp gun, there is a maximum inlet pressure. Usually it's, you know, whatever it is, this one's 29 psi. And the reason there's a maximum inlet pressure is at that pressure or below, you know, trigger pulled, you set it at your regulator at your gun, at that maximum inlet pressure or below, you will not exceed 10 psi at the air cap. So there is a trick that some guys will use with an hvlp gun when they're doing their clear coats, is you can bump the pressure up at your regulator. Yes, it will exceed the 10 psi at the air cap. It won't hurt the way the gun operates, it'll actually help it. Because of the higher pressure you're getting coming out of your air cap, it'll atomize your paint better and reduce your overspray slightly. So there are ways around the, I guess, the cons of an hvlp gun. However, I think for if it's a higher CFM requirement hvlp gun, your basic do-it-yourselfer guy with a smaller compressor, this may not be the answer. There's hvlp, which I'll go into, and compliant guns, which I'll go into, that I think are probably the way to go, especially for the top coats. I've heard that hvlp is better for the base coats, and the compliant guns, or the reduced pressure guns, and the LVLP guns are really good for top coats. But there's good and bad about both of those too. So I went over the conventional, went over the hvlp, like I said, I'll go over the LVLP and the compliant. And like I said, I just kind of want to give you guys some basic knowledge of how these guns operate, so you can make an educated decision on what you think you might want to buy if you're just starting out or you're upgrading or what have you.